my pleasure to welcome everyone on this virtual platform. We would like to extend a special welcome for our speaker, Mr. Siddharth Patle, who will be speaking on Admiralty Act. We are excited to have you all here to participate in this very special meeting organized by Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum. We could not have pulled off this 13th virtual meeting without hard work and dedication of our MPLF team who have worked tirelessly for all our meets. I hope that today's meet inspires ideas and discussion that can bring about constructive and transforming changes in our fields. Thank you.
Request Shoham to give the introduction speech. Mr. Shoham, the floor is yours.
Yes. Welcome everyone, one and all. It's a great pleasure and honor to introduce none other than my partner, Mr. Siddharth S. Patale, to this forum. Siddharth is a graduate from DES Law College, and after passing out in year 2012, he has worked with few of the stalwarts in Pune like Deepak Deshpande and Abhijit Anturkar before starting with his own practice. Siddharth's main area of practices include Bombay High Court, Debt Recovery Tribunal, National Company Law Tribunal, and National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, as well as the Pune District Court. Siddharth's activities of interest in practice are company law, admiralty law, on which he is going to enlighten us all on, as well as contracts and contract drafting. With this, I leave it open to Siddharth to conduct the session forward and enlighten us with the provisions of admiralty law. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to give my sincere thanks to Madras Presidency Lawyer Forum for giving me this opportunity to address the people who have joined us today on admiralty law. First of all, I would just like to give a caveat or a disclaimer that today is my first session. I haven't conducted any kind of session before this. So any mistakes or any interruption is, please do forgive me for that. And saying so, I would like to start with my presentation today on admiralty law. So firstly, I would like to start by saying this, that maritime law is the umbrella law which governs the law of the sea. Maritime law in itself includes various laws which relate to salvage, which relates to wrecks, which relates to mortgage of ship, which relates to registration of ship, which also relates to carriage of goods by sea, marine insurance, so on and so forth. But the core of maritime law deals with the laws of the sea and the international trade law. Another important aspect under which the admiralty law falls is the carriage of goods by sea, which deals with issues that arise out of dispute of bills of landing or a dispute which is arising out of or relating to charter parties. Now, considering this, admiralty is an activity, or admiralty is concerned with activities which occur at the sea and which include ships both small and big. And admiralty law can be summed up as a law which governs the claims arising out of the accidents or the injuries or the incidences that happens at the sea which are caused by the vessels. So this is a brief introduction of admiralty law. Now let me give you a small history of admiralty law in India. The oldest mention or the record of admiralty jurisdiction with the courts of India can be traced back to the Records Court of Bombay, which were established under the charter in 1798. Then after, high courts were established. In those times it were known as imperial courts. So the imperial courts of Madras, Bombay and Calcutta had the territorial jurisdiction of all the sea, had the jurisdiction of over the territorial waters of India at that point in time. Then after, after the independence till the enactment of this act, these three courts enjoyed the jurisdiction over all the territorial waters of India, which meant that a court in Calcutta could issue a warrant of arrest for any ship which is within the territorial waters of India, which might be in Calcutta, which might be in Madras, or which might be in Mumbai, or even at the coast of Gujarat. So then after a long time, and on the recommendation of Law Commission, the Admiralty Jurisdiction and Settlement of Maritime Claims Act of 2017 was enacted. This act was passed by the Parliament on 9th August 2017, and the act has came into force from 1st April 2018. The object of the act is read, which is, it is an act to consolidate the laws relating to Admiralty jurisdiction, legal proceedings in connection with vessels, their arrest, detention, sale, and other matters connecting therewith and incidental thereto. So it is quite clear that the Act of 2017 is a consolidated act, which according to the settled law, which is provided in Innovative Industries Act in Innovative Industries case in 2018, which states that a consolidated it is a settled position of law that a consolidated law is a complete code in itself and is exhaustive with matters that it deals with. So there is no ambiguity as to in what matters the Admiralty law is applicable. The Admiralty Code in itself has given in what aspects the Admiralty law deals with and which court has the jurisdiction. It has been given in the law itself. So, furthermore, the purpose of the Admiralty Act is to vest certain kind of very important and valuable rights in respect of maritime claims which are identified with the claimant, and they are called as right in rem. So any action which takes place or occurs under the Act of 2017 is a right in rem, which means it is the right against the world, and it is right in on res. So it is on the property. So the right in rem and the manner in which the right can be exercised by the high courts. The jurisdiction for this act is exclusively with the high courts, and no other court or subordinate court has the jurisdiction to enforce or any of the proceedings. So the right in rem and the manner in which the right can be exercised and enforced is given in the act, and this right is enforced by the means of arrest of a ship. So arrest of ship is a very interesting concept which is there in this act. I'll get to the definition of this of arrest when we are going through the actual text of the act. And arrest of the ship does not in any kind of literally sense means that, or under the provision, it does not mean is not applicable as per the provisions of Indian Penal Code or Criminal Procedure Code. The Admiralty jurisdiction, in Admiralty jurisdiction, a ship is treated as a legal entity of its own. So if any right or any claim that is to be accomplished or which has to be charged against, it is against the vessel itself, as it has been considered as a legal entity in altogether. It is not necessary that the owner of the ship or owner of the vessel needs to be a party to the proceedings. A ship is a separate legal entity against whom the action can be commenced without its owner, as I've earlier pointed out. It is important to note that the action against the ship or the vessel is action in rem. It is the vessel that is liable for the wrongs that has been done by itself and not the owner. Therefore, the fundamental basis of this act is the action in rem. Another noteworthy feature of Admiralty jurisdiction is that the claimant or the plaintiff is not concerned with who is the owner of the ship. His only concern where the ship is and whether it is in the territorial jurisdiction or territorial waters of the court. And another important aspect is that, a very interesting aspect is that neither the owner is a necessary party in the proceeding nor a proper party in the proceeding, since ship in itself has its own identity. So a service of arrest warrant on the ship is enough for the ship to be restrained from going out of the territorial waters of the country. Again, in admiralty jurisdiction, as I've mentioned earlier, it being action in rem, there is no requirement for issue of writ of summons, as it is required in a case of in action in personam, wherein the presence of the party is necessary for the proceeding to be conducted ahead. Herein, the party, the owner of the vessel, is not at all a necessary party, since the claim has to be satisfied by the ship itself and no one else. The proceedings can be converted into action in personam only when the owner, if he appears before the court and he surrenders to the jurisdiction of that court, then only the action in rem can be converted or is converted into action in personam. As concerned, why is it the emphasis of a ship or a vessel being of individual personality has been stressed by the apex court of this land in MV Elizabeth versus Harvan Investment and Trading Company, which said that the ship is treated as a separate judicial personality altogether, and it is almost like a corporate, having not only rights but also liabilities, sometimes which are distinct from the owner of the ship. Again, in a very recent case, M. Siddiqui versus Mahant Suresh Das and others, which is also called as the Ram Janmabhoomi case, the Supreme Court of India has considered that while considering independent legal personalities, the court has emphasized and mentioned the conferment of legal personality on a ship. So ship has been considered as an independent legal personality with its own rights and its own liabilities. So this is a short introduction of what admiralty law or a history of it is like. Now I would like to go through the text of this act, which is very important. And this act is very small. It has only 18 sections, but every section in it can have a discussion or a separate session can be conducted on most of the sections in this act. So let's start by going through the act simultaneously, one after the other. So as earlier mentioned, this act has been enacted by the Parliament in the 68th year of its republic, and has on 9th of August 2017, and it has come into force from 1st of April 2018. The section 1 of this act says that it shall be called the Admiralty Jurisdiction and Settlement of Maritime Claims Act of 2017. The most important part of this act, or a part which is different from the regular act, is that normally in other acts it is said that it applies to the whole of India, including the territory of state Jammu and Kashmir. Herein it says that this act shall apply to every vessel, irrespective of the place of residence or domicile of the owner. So by this subsection 2 of section 1, it is made amply clear that the provisions of this act are applicable even to a ship or a vessel which is considered as a foreign vessel, but who is within the territorial waters of this country. So the High Courts will have jurisdiction and can take action against the claim which have arisen against it. Not only the Indian ship or the ships which which bear the Indian flag, or any other ship which bears any other flag of any other country. Act further provides that this Act will not apply to certain kind of vessels, which includes, first are the vessels which are included in inland waters, with the definition of which is given in clause A of subsection 1 or section 2 of the Inland Vessels Act of 1917. The provisions of this Act also do not apply to vessels which are under construction and have not been launched into the sea until and unless there is a notification of the government which says that a claim against such kind of vessels is also maintained. Other types of vessels which have been excluded from the jurisdiction of this Act are the warships or the naval ancillary ships and other vessels owned or operated by the central or the state government, or a vessel which has not been utilized for commercial transactions, for commercial purpose, and even a foreign ship which is not being used for commercial purposes is excluded from the jurisdiction of this Act. Now let's talk about few important definitions which define, according to me, which define the entire gist of this Act. The first of it is, as I mentioned, is the word arrest. What does arrest mean? Arrest does not signify that you take the ship and put it behind bars, or you place barriers around the ship. It simply means, arrest means detention or restriction for removal of a vessel by order of a high court to secure a maritime claim, including seizure of vessel in execution or satisfaction of a judgment or an order. So this definition makes it amply clear that basically arrest means restriction on the movement of the ship, that once it enters into jurisdiction and once it is found out by the court that there are reasons to be believed that there is a claim and those are proper claims against the ship or the vessel, the court issues a warrant of arrest. So when that is given, it means that the ship cannot go outside the territorial waters under which the High Court is, under whose territorial waters the High Court is there. The other important definition which needs to be considered is of the High Court, because a restriction of the vessel can be only restricted by an order of the High Court and no other court. So the High Court, according to this Act, is the High Courts in relation to Admiralty proceedings means any of the High Courts having judicature at Calcutta, Bombay, Madras, Karnataka, Gujarat, Odisha, Kerala, and High Courts having judicature at Hyderabad for the state of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, or any other court as the central government may notify. But as of now, there are only these 8 High Courts which have been notified, and no other courts have been notified. Now, the other important aspect, or which as most important definition in this entire Act, is that of a vessel. A vessel includes the following types of ships. It includes a ship, a boat, a sailing vessel, or other description of vessels. Used or constructed for use in navigation. So, a boat, a ship, or a vessel, the underlining thing is it needs to be used for navigation. Then only it will be termed as a vessel under the definition of this Act. Whether it can be propelled or not, it can also include a barge. It can include a lighter or other floating vessels. It also includes a hovercraft or an offshore industry mobile unit. A vessel, again, the definition also extends to a vessel which has sunk or is stranded or is abandoned and the remains of such vessel. So it is not only the definition does not it not only includes the moving or the vessels which are used in navigation, but also vessels which are sunk, which are stranded, abandoned, or and the remains of such vessels. Again, there is an exception, there is an explanation to this definition, which says if a ship which is sunk, which is an abandoned ship, and that is broken to such an extent that it cannot be put together and cannot be brought into navigation again, then such vessel then such boat or vessel will not be considered as a vessel under the definition under clause L of subsection 1 of section 2. So this is so breaking of vessel is an also important thing. Now let's move further to chapter 2 of this act, which is about the admiralty jurisdiction and the maritime claim. Now section 3 of this act talks about the admiralty jurisdiction, subject to the provision which says that the subject to the provisions of section 4 and 5, the jurisdiction in respect of all maritime claim under this act shall vest with the respective high courts and be exercisable over the waters up to and include the territorial waters with the respect to their respective jurisdiction in accordance with the provisions contained in this act. So this means is that before the passing of this this act, that the jurisdiction of the court, as I've mentioned earlier, was for the entire territorial waters. Now, after passing of this act, every high court, the high courts, which 8 high courts which I've mentioned earlier, now have the jurisdiction to take an action against the claim which is within their territorial waters only. So now, the High Court in Bombay cannot take action if a ship is within the territorial waters that are within Karnataka High Court's territory. So now their jurisdiction has been restricted by section 3 of this act. Earlier that was not the case. After that, there is also provision to section 3 which says that the government may extend the jurisdiction of this court by giving an appropriate notification of that. Now let us come to one of the most important sections of this act, that is section 4, which deals with the maritime claim. And what is a maritime claim? The High Court may exercise jurisdiction to hear and determine any question on a maritime claim against any vessel arising out of any of the following cases, which start from alphabet A to alphabet X. I would just touch a few important provisions or clauses from A to I and O, because other clauses in themselves can be discussed at a length. And as we have a very limited time, so I'll just touch upon the most important things in it. A claim can arise out of or regarding to the ownership or the possession of the vessel, and ownership of or if there is any share in the ownership. This can be decided by the High Court. Or a dispute which arises between the co-owners of the vessel and the employment or the employees of the vessel. A dispute which can arise out of a mortgage is decided by the High Court and the charge created thereafter. If there is any loss or damage caused by the operation of the vessel, even this question or any question arising out of this is considered by the High Court under section 4 of this act. Then if there is any loss of person or if there is any personal injury which may have occurred either on land or at sea is discussed or is looked into by the High Court under provision under clause E of subsection 1 of section 4, or if there is any damage, loss or damage to the containers with containers of the goods, or there is an issue which has arisen out of an agreement relating to carriages of goods or the passengers on board of the vehicles of the vessel. Sorry. H again there it says that the agreement any dispute which arises out of the agreement relating to the use hire of the vessel, whether contained in charter party or not. So here the charter party plays an important role. There are three types of basic charter parties. First is a time charter party. Second is a voyage charter party, and third is a bareboat charter party. So any dispute arising out of any three of these charter parties will be dealt by the High Court under section 4. Another dispute or the claims which may arise out of the salvage services which are provided by the salvage services provider are dealt under this provision only. And another important issue which is dealt by this court, according to me, is the claims which are raised by the master or the members or the crew of the vessel for non-payment of their wages, for other sums which are due to them. If those are not paid on behalf of the owner, then these people can definitely go to the High Court and ask and claim their maritime claim over the vessel. Now next, moving further, subsection 2 of section 4 says that the High Court may settle the High Court has the jurisdiction to settle any accounts of outstanding claims between the parties in relation to the vessel and direct that vessel or any share thereof to be sold. So, according to subsection 2, if the High Court can exercise its jurisdiction if there are any unsettled accounts between the parties who own the vessel or between the crew of the vessel and the owner of the vessel, then the High Court has the jurisdiction to send the vessel for auction and sell it off, and the funds which are received from such sale can be used to pay off the claims which have arisen. Now, subsection 3 says that the High Court can order. The High Court order where the High Court orders any sale to be any vessel to be sold, it may hear and determine any question arising out of its title and proceed of the sale. So, if there is a question between who is to receive or who is to receive the amount after the sale, that can also be decided by the court. Moving ahead, section 5 of this act says, which is in relation to the arrest of vessel in rem. It says that the High Court may order arrest of the vessel which is within its jurisdiction for the purpose of providing security against a maritime claim which is the subject of an admiralty proceeding where the court has reason to believe. So what it says is that the High Court can order the arrest of a vessel and sell it under the provisions of this act for the purpose of securing security against the maritime claim, where a person who owned the vessel at the time when the maritime claim arose is liable for the claim and is the owner of the vessel when the arrest is effected. B, the demise charter of the vessel at the time when the maritime claim arose is liable for the claim and is the demise and is the demise charter or the owner of the vessel when the arrest is affected. C, the claim is based on a mortgage or a charge of a similar nature on the vessel. Or D, the claim relates to the ownership or the possession of the vessel. E, the claim is against the owner, the demise charter, manager, or the operator of the vessel and is secured by a maritime lien as provided under Section 9. So, in short, Section 5 gives us the insight in where the High Court, under what circumstances, the High Court can issue a warrant of arrest when it is satisfied with the above mentioned clauses. Subsection 2 of Section 5 says that the High Court order the arrest. This section relates to the sister vessel, which says that the High Court may also order arrest of any other vessel for the purpose of providing security against the maritime claim in lieu of a vessel against which a maritime claim has been made under this Act, subject to the provisions of subsection 1. So, subsection 2 gives power to the High Court to issue an order of arrest of a vessel which is a sister vessel which is owned by the same person. So, if a sister vessel is within the territorial waters of that High Court, then the High Court has the power to issue an order of arrest of that vessel as well under this provision. Now, Section 6 talks about the Admiralty jurisdiction in personam. This section deals and gives the power of the High Court to exercise its Admiralty jurisdiction by action in personam in respect of any maritime claims referred to Clause 8 to W of subsection 1 of Section 4, which means that if the court is satisfied that a action of personam is there, if a case under action of personam is maintainable, the court can order such proceedings. Now, now the question arises that when does a action in rem is converted into action in personam? The action in rem is converted only when converted into action in personam when the owner of the ship appears before the court and furnishes a bail or a security for the release of the ship. At that point in time only, the court converts the action in rem into action of person. And when such transition takes place, the owner of the ship also becomes personally liable to fulfill the claims if the bail or the security which has been provided by him is insufficient to satisfy the claim. So that is what Section 6 says. Now Section 7 puts restriction as to when the action in rem cannot be converted into action in personam. It says that when any maritime claim arising in respect of damage or loss of life or personal injury has arisen out of any of the following things, which is collision between vessels or the carrying out of omission of the carrying out of or omission to carry out a maneuver in the case of one or more vessels, non-compliance on the part of one or more vessels in the collision regulation made in pursuance of Section 285 of the Merchant Shipping Act 1958. So these are the things. So these are the provisions wherein an action which puts restriction on action in personam. It is further provided that an action may be entertained in a case where there are there are more defendants. So if there are more than one defendant and one of them is residing in who is defendant when where there is more than one defendant and where one of the defendant who does not actually reside actually and voluntarily resides or carries out business or personally work for the gain in for gain in India is made party to such action either with the then such person can be made a party only with the leave of the court and not otherwise. Now, subsection 2 of section 7 says that the High Court shall not entertain any action in personam to enforce a claim which this section applies until any proceedings which have been carried out by the plaintiff against the same defendant in relation to an incident which has happened or a series of incidents which has happened, and if they are in continuation, then the High Court cannot start an action in personam against them. The action in personam can only be started or be initiated if those claims have either been discontinued or have come to a logical end. Then only action in personam can be initiated. Section 3 of subsection 3 of section 7 says that the provisions of subsection 2 shall apply to counter claims also. Subsection 4 says that who is defined as plaintiff and defendant, and how is it defined as plaintiff and defendant in counter claims. Subsection 5 deals with the provisions as the provisions of subsection 2 and 3 shall not apply to any action or counter claim if the defendant submits or agrees to submit to the jurisdiction of the High Court. So if the defendant, any of either in claim or in counter claim, if he admits to the jurisdiction of the court, then then the provisions under subsection 2 and 3 are not applicable. Furthermore, under subsection 6, subject to the provisions of subsection 2, the High Court shall have jurisdiction to entertain an action in personam to enforce a claim to which this section applies whenever any of the conditions specified in clause A and B of subsection 1 is satisfied and any law for the time being in force relating to the service of process outside the jurisdiction shall apply. Now, section 8 of the Act states or is relating to vesting of rights of sale of vessel. So, wherein this section provides that once the plaintiff comes before the court, gives his claim, and says, and the court is satisfied that the plaintiff or the claimant has a very valid claim, and issues an arrest warrant, a warrant of arrest against the ship, and that has been affixed on the either served on the master of the ship or master of the vessel, or has been, if the master refuses, and if then it is affixed on the outer hull of the vessel, and if the claim and if the owner does not come forward, and if he does not provide any security, then the court passes an order for auction of the vessel or the sale of the vessel, and when once the sale of the vessel has been completed under this act, the vessel shall rest with the purchaser, free from all encumbrances, liens, attachments, registered mortgage, and charges of any nature of the vessel. So once any bona fide purchaser purchases the vessel under section 8 of this act, then he becomes a purchaser in good faith, and any of the charges, maritime liens, maritime claims, which are with the maritime claims which are with or which are on the vessel are do not prevail, and the sale is free of encumbrance. So now let's come to section 9 of this act, which deals with maritime lien. Now, maritime lien, the difference between maritime lien and maritime claim is that all maritime liens are maritime claims, but all maritime claims are not maritime liens. And section 9 provides that actually section 9 provides the priority of maritime liens, which will when a claim is made, then which lien is to be satisfied first. The sequence of these liens is given under section 9(1) of that. The first lien which is there is of the claims of wages and other sums which are due to the master, to the members and the officers of the vessel, which also includes the cost of repatriation and social insurance contribution payable on their behalf. The second lien which is next is a lien in respect of loss of life or personal injury which has been caused by the vessel. Then the next lien which is there is the lien or the claims of the person who provides the salvage services. So that is the third lien which is there on the vessel. The fourth lien which is there on the vessel is that of the claims of the claims of the dues which are payable to the ports, the canals, other waterways, or the pilotage dues. That has the fourth lien. The fifth lien which is there are those which are arising out of the tortious claims based on torts arising out of loss or damages caused by the operation of the vessel, other than losses or damages to cargo and containment carried on the vessel. So basically, these are the 5 liens which are there, which and their priority is given from A to E. So the wages of the master, of the officer, and of the other crew members has the primary or the most important lien which is there on the vessel. Then the second, as discussed, it is if there is any claim which is arising out of loss of life or a personal injury has been caused due to operation of the vessel. Then third lien is the claims of salvage service provider. The fourth claim is of all the claims or the dues which are necessary to be paid to the port, canals, other waterways, which also includes the pilotage dues. And the last is a claim which has arisen out of tort, arising out of the loss or damages caused by the operation of the vessel. Now, further, subsection 2 of section 9 says that a maritime lien specified under subsection 1 shall continue to exist with the vessel, notwithstanding the change of the ownership, or if it is sold from either from one country to another country, or there is a change in the registration of the ship. So even if these things happen, the lien on the vessel does not change. It is there. And it continues for a period of 1 year unless prior so any lien which is there on a vessel continues to exist for 1 year, and the lien in relation to clause B to clause E of subsection 1 has a limitation of 1 year, whereas the maritime lien, which is under clause A of subsection 1, has a period of 2 years. So, these liens or these claims start from, or their limitation starts for wages of the wages of its master and crew members. It starts from the day they discharge from the vessel or they disembark from the vessel, and the limitation for the claims arising out of clause B to clause E under subsection 1 arises when actually these claims arise, and these claims continue without any suspension or interruption. These are continuously flowing claims. Furthermore, subsection 4 of this act says that no maritime lien shall attach to a vessel to secure a claim which arises out of or results from damage in connection to the carriage of oil or hazardous substances, and or any claims which arise out of radioactive properties which it has been carrying. So subsection 4 says that if any damage or any claim has arisen against that vessel due to damage while it was carrying hazardous materials or toxic materials, then this provision cannot be invoked. Furthermore, section 10 says about the order of priority of the claims against the vessel. So section 4 talks basically about three things, three ways in which the claims have their priorities. The first is where there is maritime lien. So whenever there is maritime lien, it is the first claim that has to be satisfied, irrespective of other claims. Then the second claim which needs to be satisfied is that which arises out of the mortgage or a charge over the vessel. And third is our rest claim, or are all the rest of the claims which are there. So subsection 2, subsection 1 say, as it shows that when the priority in which the claims have to be satisfied. Subsection 2 of this section says that the following principles shall apply in determining the priorities of claim inter se. So these two clause A and clause B of subsection 2 of section 10 tells us the priority in which the claims need to be satisfied inter se, where the claim if there are more than one claim in any of the one of the categories, then they shall be ranked equal amongst them. So if you say that there are claims against a vehicle, against a vessel, and there are two claims under clause A of subsection 1 of section 10. There are three claims against in clause B of subsection 1 of section 10. Then they all will be treated equally. And if there are and it is exactly opposite in the case of salvage claims, wherein the salvage claims are always satisfied inversely. So the last salvage services will salvage service provider will be compensated, or will be the claim of or his claim will be satisfied first, and the person who was first to provide salvage services will be the last person to have his claim satisfied. Now moving ahead, Section 11 of this Act provides certain kind of protection to the defenders or the owners of the vessel. While making this Act, the framers of this Act or the legislation has also taken care of few things which might adversely affect the rights of the defendant in these claims, which is always owner of the ship or a vessel. Herein, it says that if the court, while issuing an order of arrest or issuing an order of arrest or permitting or the High Court is permitting is permitting an arrest already effected to be maintained, or has when these two things are happening, the High Court imposes imposes an obligation, an unconditional obligation upon the claimant, wherein he has to deposit a sum specified by the High Court with the High Court, so that when the court finds out that the order of arrest was obtained with malified intentions, and due to which losses have been incurred to the vessel owner, then he needs to be compensated accordingly. So, following things are included but not restricted while considering this compensation. First is the arrest has been wrongfully or was justified. Second, excessive security has been demanded by the claimant and has been provided by the owner of the vessel. If in these two cases, if court finds out any of these two cases, then the amount which has been paid, unconditionally paid by the claimant, has been handed over to the owner of the vessel. Subsection 2 of Section 11 says that where pursuant of subsection 1, the person providing security, so when such a person who is providing a security anytime can make an application to the court and have the security which has been provided by him, and either have it reduced, modified, or cancelled by making an application to the court. Subsection 3 says that if the owner or the demised charter abandons the vessel after its arrest, the High Court shall cause the vessel to be auctioned, and the proceedings appropriated and dealt with in such manner as the court may deem fit within a period of 45 days from the date of arrest or abandonment. So what subsection 3 of Section 11 provides is that when a ship is arrested and the owner of the ship does not appear before the court and abandons the ship, the High Court has the jurisdiction to cause the auction of the vessel, and whatever the proceedings which have been received from the auction of the vessel shall be utilized within 45 days from the date of arrest to satisfy the claim. There is also proviso to this subsection which says that for reasons to be recorded, the High Court may extend the date of auction by another 30 days. So this insofar was chapters 2 of the Act, which dealt with the jurisdiction of the Admiralty jurisdiction and maritime claims under this Act. Now part 3, yes sir.
How much time will it take? Because
sir, another 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Fine.
Only 5 sections are left.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So now coming to chapter 3, which provides for the procedure and appeals under this act. So section 12 provides, says that the provisions of Code of Civil Procedure Code are applicable under this law. So it does not provide any separate provisions according to which the matter should be conducted, but it says that the normal provisions of CPC will be applicable under when the claim is to be asserted. Section 13 says that notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, the central government shall appoint by notification a list of assessors in such with such qualifications and experience in admiralty or maritime matters, the nature and duty of the performance of them, and fees, so on. So section 13 says, as section 13 gives that mentions how an assessor or gives the power to the central government to frame rules under section 13 of this act as to what will be the qualification of an assessor, how he'll be appointed, and what will be his fees and everything. Section 14 of this act says that when a claim has been adjudicated or a judgment has been passed or a final order or an interim order has been passed by a single judge bench of the High Court, the appeal lies to the bench, by a single judge of the High Court, the appeal lies to the division bench of the High Court. Section 15 says that Section 15 gives power to Supreme Court to transfer any of the admiralty matters from any of the High Court to any other High Court. It also says that when a particular matter is transferred from, say, Bombay High Court to Calcutta High Court, and when the matter reaches the Calcutta High Court, the proceeding will start from where it was left before the Bombay High Court. Chapter 4 of this act is relating to miscellaneous powers. So under section 16, I would like to put it in this way, that by utilization of power which has been provided under section 16, the central government has enacted maritime law rules which are in relation to appointment of assessors. Now coming to the most important, one of the most important again sections. Actually, I intended to mention this section at the earliest, at the onset itself. This section tells us that when this admiralty jurisdiction, when this Act of 2017 came into force, few of the acts were repealed by this act. So the acts which have been repealed are the Admiralty Codes Act 1840, the Admiralty Codes Act 1861, the Colonial Court of Admiralty Act 1890, the Colonial Court of Admiralty India Act of 1891, and the provisions of letter patents of 1865, so as far they are applicable to Admiralty jurisdiction of Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras High Court. And section 18 gives power to the central government to remove any difficulties which may occur in future while dealing with the provisions of this act. So this, in short, is what the Admiralty Act is, all section 18 of them. And now, if anyone has any questions, I would like to answer them.
Yeah, that's a wonderful session there, brother. May now request the participants to raise the questions by raising the hands option, so that we can unmute you and the questions can be raised. Professor Prakash, you can
You
raise your
can
question.
unmute yourself.
Yeah, it was wonderful sessions, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Very nicely explained. And my query is, you said that the act is applicable only for commercial vehicles, commercial vessels. Sorry, commercial
Yes,
vessels.
sir. Yes, sir.
Suppose if it is otherwise, what is the remedy for the party?
So as for if the vessels which are not you, there are different provisions. There are different acts which govern it. The Maritime Act in itself has provisions for it. This act specifically deals for commercial transactions only. So ships which are under commercial transaction or which carry out commercial goods, transport of commercial goods. This act is only for that. Other acts will be dealt with in accordance with the action which has arisen out of it. So if there are criminal actions, then criminal law will be applicable. If there is other contracts in relating to contract, then contract provisions will be applicable to it.
Thank you.
Let's go for Impression.
May now request Mr. Wadekar to give the impression, please. Mr. Wadekar.
Mr. Odikar, you can unmute yourself.
Yes. This is a nice lecture upon the subject, and with serious and very important features of that law. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah.
Uh,
I am Advocate Odekar.
you are senior to Siddharth or
So he's senior to me as well as Soham.
Yes.
Very good.
We
That is
are.
what I want.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
May now request Ram Ayappan to give the impression, please. So Ram Ayappan.
Unmute yourself, Ram.
Very good evening, everyone. Thank you first to Siddharth Patale for painstakingly having taken the effort to put together such a nice session. First, in how organized he's been in expressing from the provision of law to how practically situations impose upon and the remedies that could potentially be suggested to clients. Thanks a lot, and it was a very useful session in general, but in particular, generally when we have these sessions more on a very surface basis, but your discussion was very akin to how certain provisions of law can be taken advantage of in given situations. So thanks a lot. Well done.
Manikandan, you
Sir?
can add Arvind, Advocate Mr. Arvind, for impression. Mr. Arvind?
Am I audible?
Yeah, audible.
Yeah, it's very nice. And I'm very happy to note that a lot of youngsters are here who can gain a lot of knowledge on these subjects, which are really new to them. And I encourage a lot of these lectures because it helps them to abreast themselves with the latest developments in law. And keep going. That's all I will say, that it's a wonderful lecture. And I would definitely encourage more of these lectures, and I wish you all the best.
Sir, one thing for your information,
Yes, sir.
and no, for our Mr. Arvind,
Yes.
we encourage normally maximum first timers in this forum.
Excellent.
And so far we have done 13 programs, including today. So 95% of the people are first timers. Even Mr. Siddharth, in his opening statement, he said, "I just going to give my first thing. If anything is wrong, kindly excuse all those things he has requested."
No.
So-
I think this is the only way where he can get over this stage fear, I would say. and
Yes.
encourage them to be more expressive and learn. It's a wonderful
Yes.
platform for everybody, especially these beginners. It's a wonderful
Very.
platform.
Thank you,
And
sir.
I
Thank
think
you.
the organizers are doing a great job.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think two people are there.
Mr. Gopi, you
We
can
have to
unmute
unmute
yourself
Mr.
and
Doctor.
Hello,
Mr.
sir.
Gopi,
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
raise the question.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Already, vessel was arrested by some service provider. Again, crew member can file a suit for their arrears of salary. Again, they can arrest the vehicle.
Yes, sir. They have to file an independent claim, and they have to be party. They have to be made party for the previous claim as well.
Mr. Dr. T. Ramasamy, please, you can raise the question.
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. Fatale. Was very good, very good. Your what do you call comments on the liens as well as arrest was very good. I'm a
Thank you,
practicing advocate with the Madras High Court, having what do you call commercial transactions or otherwise suits in maritime aspects. This Admiralty Act, very good. Though you have covered the entire law, it is what I say, praiseworthy and immense. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And
Siddharth had something to say.
Anything you wanted to say,
Yes, sir.
Siddharth? Yeah.
I said that your expression, sir. Would you like to express few things?
So what to say? I think today you have given many people are new to this sections here, except few are practicing in that area. But
Yes.
it's an eye opener for all of them, so they can also venture henceforth in this Admiralty thing. And your number is there in the card also. But what you say, you are a first timer.
Yes,
But
sir.
it's not seems to be like that, and you have done extremely well. I think so. But you did a wonderful job, and we
you,
expect more. But today, finally, you have done a beautiful job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And there are two more people on the question session. Rajendran, unmute yourself, and thereafter Uday Kumar, Uday Shekhar.
Siddharth, the fine way you've done. Actually, it is a very interesting and a dull area, Admiralty jurisdiction and the thing. It's a very elaborate one. So it would sometimes look like a theory going on. Did very well.
Thank
Fantastic.
you, sir.
Now the new maritime piracy is also there. There is one more thing which is going to come in. So
Yes, it is yet to come.
Some more dynamic changes into that. Because on a commercial angle, in most of the places we suffer because of that.
Yes,
so
sir.
that is, but it is, as international law is little weak. Again, how to bring in, that will be the thing. But you went on very well, beautiful. I would continue with what my good brother Ravi Meenakshi told, that you don't look like a first timer. Congrats.
Thank you, sir.
All the best, all the best. We look forward.
Uday Shekhar, unmute yourself.
Good evening, Siddharth.
Good evening, sir.
Being the first time making a presentation in a forum like this, the commendable attention you are given to all the act in details is really commendable.
Thank you, sir.
My question is actually not a question, but more of academic best. So we have this Admiralty law.
Yes,
we
sir.
also have this maritime law. Both are two different laws.
So maritime law, there is no as such maritime law in India. There is only Admiralty law which is currently in existence, which governs the commercial aspect of shipping industry or any claims which arise out of it.
In maritime in act for the sea rules, we have this jurisdiction split into territorial waters, contagion zone, continental shelf, and exclusive economic zone and high seas.
Yes.
Is that the same kind of thing that will be applicable in the maritime act?
But the territorial jurisdiction, yes, the central government can extend the territorial jurisdiction to the territory which has been mentioned in the Special Economic Zone Act. if the central government intends to increase the jurisdiction, it can.
Brother Kanmani, you can now give your impression.
It's a very excellent session by Mr. Siddharth, our speaker today.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, sir. Sir, almost Admiralty is something different act which we are thinking that it is unreachable by the normal advocates. As if you are explaining is very reachable for each and every one of the effective practitioners. So it's so you have explained in very nutshell, which is very easy to practice in that field, sir. Thank you for your session today.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Say something about this program and about
Please part of all this.
Introduce yourself first.
I am Advocate Harshit Sathe. I'm practicing Bombay High Court. But I am at my hometown, so I was trying to connect it for about an hour, but I couldn't. So I have come to my friend's place. Unfortunately, I missed the whole video. But then I'll get back to Siddharth on this.
He did well. He did well.
And Harshad have studied in the same college, and we are classmates.
Yes. Yes.
Arshad, he did well, extremely
of course,
well.
Of course, I am proud to be his friend.
Thanks, brother Siddharth, for a wonderful session for the day. And it has been a very good presentation with you. And before we are going to conclude the session, our next topic will be on economic offense by Advocate Sri Krishna, which will be our session will be coming Friday or on Saturday. Which will be really informed by regular WhatsApp messages. And I now request Brother Suresh to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. And I am very thankful to our today's speaker, Mr. Siddharth, and I am congratulating him for his excellent session given today. In this session, we have taken a topic which is the rarest one in our profession, and you made it sparkling by your presentation, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And I am thankful to our Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum, teaming with Mr. Ravi Meenakshi sir and Mr. Manikandan sir, Mr. Sivaprakash sir, Mr. Ramamayappan sir and Madam Jayanti Shah. All of these made it this team as an excellent one. And in this team, which have several experts and seniors as members, still they are providing platform for upcoming lawyers and encouraging them for themselves. And further, I have to thankful and grateful to all our participants, because without them, this Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum will not sustain us a victorious every time. And thankful to all of them. Thank you very much.